There's something truly extraordinary about the human mind. In one occasions, I met a very interesting man in one of the traditional cafes in my city. And that man was blind, and what was so peculiar is that he used his stick and fingers to sense every single corner of that cafe. He didn't leave a single object untouched. The teacups, the ashtray, and even the dusty books over the bookshelf that probably left unnoticed for decades. After he sat down and drank his tea, and a little bit of chitty-chatting, I asked him why he does all of that, and the answer was that he can't enter a room unless he examines every single bit of his surrounding. For that long time, I've somehow developed an analogy of the dark room that tells how significant our brain are. So basically, once you enter a room, there will be a tiny representation of it in your mind as dark. And that darkness is often illuminated by your senses. First of all, you use your eyesight, and then if the person is blind, is oftenly replaced by your senses of touch and smell, of course. And one of the most aching feeling is that when a part of that room remains dark or unknown, it is most likely will appear as a threat or as something dangerous, something uncomfortable on every single situation. And that man, that cafe, didn't look for object as an uncontrolled curiosity or just messing around. He examined the cafe as a crucial trait for our survival. He might jumped into a hole or something. And actually, this thing has a very huge benefits. I mean, that aching feeling of not knowing made us to look out into nature and how it works. And it started with why does it rain? It's probably that the gods are angry. Let's make a couple of human sacrifices to please them out, and shout out to all the humans who died along this process. But it started when not knowing is much more like a threat or an uncomfortable feeling. But when the object of discomfort, of strangeness, of not knowing becomes another human being, here it becomes much more complicated. And Orientalism is the study of strangeness, of foreignness. It is of how the Oriental, usually the West, perceives the Orient, Asians and mostly Arabs. And that image is that the Arab mind is mostly incapable of performing any of the sciences, that it is incompatible with science and logic, that he is much more biologically built for the realm of violence and not to that of rationality, and knows nothing except for the language of poetry and the sword. Surely these things are said less nowadays, but somehow they are the elephant in the room that we can all feel, sense and see, controlling the narrative of the popular media, articles, movies, and even memes. Overgeneralizations and objectifying the subjective were the means of Orientalism. And in fact, those generalizations didn't start in one day or two, but somehow they started just after the Renaissance. There wasn't a single prestigious institution that didn't bear a department named as the House of Oriental or Eastern Studies. And the reason that this mostly has a negative impressions is that it started with the aching feeling. So you'll jump with the proposition into much further grounds. First of all, it started as a theoretical knowledge, and then with Napoleon's expedition to Egypt, it became a much more practical science. And I call it science because it is dealt as a science. First of all, you have the theoretical knowledge, experimentation, and then you will develop a much more practical apparatus, or a weapon, if you can call it. For example, T.A. Lawrence and Gertrude Bell works in Iraq and the Arabia. And here's what I know. There's nothing biologically imprinted. The anatomy of the people of any culture in this world that limit the potential for the scientific ingenuity, curiosity, and creativity of their work. How about a culture that was the source of all sciences and interpretations? And if there remains only one thing that left unsaid through all of these decades, is that to let the Orient speak for itself. Surely it's now much more fractured than ever, and it's probably because that the Orient fell to the belief and to live the illusionment that became his most eminent reality, or inevitable reality. And actually, the point of this video is not to coin any culture as the West is bad or the Orient is good. Somehow we are equally good and equally bad in our own special ways. But the point of it is only to shed light on how important when two civilizations clash with each other, to show how that strangeness and foreignness towards another human being could be both interesting, exciting, and even comforting in some sense. To show how our differences in all the races and nations and people can show how humans are paradoxically the same. And then, until then, that dark little corner of the room wouldn't be as frightening anymore.